Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. State Schools Chief Catherine Truitt is preparing to leave office at the end of her 4-year term. While she says she and her team have accomplished a lot, North Carolina's public schools still face many challenges. WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst sat down with her for an interview, and Emily joins us now. Good to see you again.
Glad to be here.
Emily, before we dig deep into Truitt, tell us, just from a high level, what does the state superintendent do?
So the superintendent of public instruction oversees the Department of Public Instruction. That's like 1,300 employees, $13 billion. Most of that's state funding, but then there's also federal funding in there. And they basically just make sure it's all spent the way it's supposed to be spent. They also provide a lot of assistance to local school leaders. So, especially, think like small school systems that maybe don't have a lot of administrators to do certain tasks. They can look to the department for guidance on things. They just oversee different programming being carried out. And they also kind of have like the ear of the state legislature. The superintendent is kind of a spokesperson in a way for schools. They're saying, I hear these things. They go to lawmakers and they say, here's what we think you need to do, or just kind of work with lawmakers to come up with a solution to a given problem.
So an advocate for the schools, but also sort of the head honcho of the schools, right? They're also overseeing, making sure that state law is being implemented within the schools and policies are being carried out, right?
Right.
Now, you've been at WRAL for Truitt's entire tenure. Did you think you'd be covering her departure so soon?
No. Honestly, I know that 5 people filed to run for this office back at the end of last year when candidate filing opened. And, I had no reason to think that anyone was going to beat her. She seemed to get along with lawmakers. She had a lot of endorsements. She had a lot of donations. And it was extremely clear to me that she was very knowledgeable about this job and very passionate about it. But of course, what you hope to do isn't necessarily the will of the voters. And she lost her primary to Republican challenger Michelle Morrow, who really took a very different tack in terms of talking about what she believed was wrong with schools. And she was more interested in some of the culture wars that Truitt has really kind of not focused on talking about.
Now, you and our colleague Laura Leslie sat down with Truitt on Monday. What were some of the high points?
Yeah, so Truitt is still very passionate about some of the same things that she has been passionate about over the years. She's really laser focused on academics. And as a part of that, also, what do kids do once they get out of K-12 schools? So the superintendent of public instruction, they oversee everything through grade 12 and not really after that. But, Catherine Truitt has been really interested in making sure that kids, when they leave high school, have a credential for, something, or they have a path to be enlisted in the military, going to school, or they're ready to just take on a full-time job. So she's still really interested in that. She's kind of in the middle of a lot of the things she wanted to do. She was really in the middle of a lot of that focus on post-secondary work. She's in the middle of focusing on improving reading instruction in K-5 schools. And she wanted to expand that to middle school. That was something she was going to go to lawmakers about. Just kind of a lot of things she was really in the middle of. And she's still clearly very passionate, still says all these things need to be done. And there's a lot of work ahead of the next superintendent, who will be Mo Green. Mo
Green is a Democrat. He won the general election in November. He'll replace Truitt in January. Are we going to see a lot of change between the two?
I think it's safe to say they're pretty different candidates. Obviously, they never went head to head, so it's kind of hard to see, how they might have responded to each other had they ever engaged in a debate. There are some similarities. There's interest in this improvement in reading instruction. They're calling it the science of reading. That's something Green has also said, it would be a good idea to expand that to middle school. So there are some similarities there, but there are also some differences. Truitt is a little bit more, conservative. Her she has this whole plan for, changing teacher pay. That admittedly, that plan didn't go anywhere. She wanted to overhaul teacher licensure. She had worked with the State Board of Education to get them on board, to get their endorsement for that plan to lawmakers, which is notable because a lot of those board members are Democratic appointments. Most of them are. So she had, kind of worked to convince people who wouldn't ordinarily vote with her to convince them of this teacher licensure overhaul. It faced pushback from the North Carolina Association of Educators and then lawmakers, who really are the main deciders in all of this, just wouldn't take it up. It would have drastically increased teacher salary. It would have kind of put teachers on, I hate to call it a hierarchy, but it would have, you would have had your entry level with different types of supports, and you would have had kind of teachers who were established who could move up in licensure. And then you would have, your leaders at the top who are making, a lot more money and really kind of based on your skill level more than years of experience. That's not something that Green has said he necessarily supports. He also wants to see a big increase in teacher pay, but he talks a lot about revering educators and really respecting them. And Truitt was a teacher for a long time. And so she really understands teachers, is sympathetic to teachers, but she really doesn't use that same terminology. She kind of thinks that it doesn't really make sense to revere teachers too much, because teachers can be very different. They have a lot of autonomy. Parents might like 5 of their kids' teachers and not like the 6th one, was something that she had mentioned. So there's kind of a different attitude there, perhaps about teachers, though not necessarily a negative sentiment from either.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dig deeper into the legacy of State Superintendent Cathy Truitt. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst about outgoing State Superintendent Catherine Truitt. Emily, your interview with Truitt, along with Capitol Bureau Chief Laura Leslie, went deep on a variety of issues. Let's go through a few of them. We talked a little bit about teacher pay before the break. Let's talk about school safety, something that's of high interest to our listeners. What did she tell you there?
Right. So she generally believes that schools are pretty safe places. But she said that there are a few things that she is really happy about. She's happy to see the threat assessment teams being required at every school. Some school districts were already doing some variation of that, but there's a new state law that this year says all schools need to have a threat assessment team. So the Center for Safer Schools under the Department of Public Instruction has been giving guidance to schools about this. And, they've really worked toward that. That division of school safety might move under a different department under a bill under consideration Wednesday. But DPI has been really involved in this, and Truitt is excited about it. Again, she believes that schools are generally safe places, but she thinks that it's really, really critical for administrators and teachers to very clearly communicate with parents, especially, when you consider the more immediate type of threats. We hear all the time about, a threat called in, there's a code red, people don't really know what to think. And, it turns out it was all unfounded. She also addressed concerns people have about trying to deter those threats, what consequences there really are for kids. And she said, when it comes to punishments for students specifically by schools, that's not something that there's a state law on. So, a district attorney might interpret things differently and they could take action in the juvenile justice system. But as far as the school goes, there's nothing in state law that says if a student does this particular thing, they should be punished in this particular way.
We talked before the break a little bit about the science of reading. What was the impact there?
Right. So the science of reading is kind of this term that gets used a lot. It's not really an official term, but what it means is basically, a change in reading curriculum to emphasize phonics more, to get rid of sight words. So, words like the, that kids might have learned as you recognize it on sight, or in getting rid of using context clues, like looking at the picture to figure out what a word is. And it really drills down on letters, individual letters, how they combine to make specific sounds. Teachers all over the state have been retrained to do this, to kind of figure out what the research says on reading. And they think they've seen some results so far. There's, a lot of reading is taught at kind of the K through 2 level, and those kids don't take standardized tests. So we kind of have some assessments of what they do take. They do take some brief quizzes that do seem to show that once they show up in school and they get some instruction, they are, outpacing the rest of the nation in terms of what they are gaining.
Now, lawmakers recently boosted funding for the state's private school voucher program. Truitt seemed to temper some of Democrats' concerns that they'd hurt public schools. What did she have to say about that?
Right. So schools are really worried that if a student leaves with a voucher, they're going to lose funding for that student. So the argument there is, and Truitt repeated this, is, well, you're no longer educating that student. What do you need that funding for? But schools have kind of countered with there are certain fixed costs. Schools are not a completely scalable endeavor. If you lose one student, you lose money, but maybe nothing else changes as far as how many teachers you need in that building, things like that. Truitt just wasn't really convinced that the consequences would end up being all that big. We do have some estimates of maybe around $72 million, give or take some money, is what public schools could collectively lose next year through the expanded private school voucher program. We really just don't know how much it will be because we don't have any data on how many voucher recipients are current private school students that public schools wouldn't be losing any money for.
Now, she also talked about the culture wars that you alluded to before the break, which might have been a bigger issue had Green lost, right?
Right. So, essentially what she was saying is she believes the truth of everything is in the middle, is kind of what she said. So she thinks that, groups, activist groups, whether they be on the left or the right or, however they bill themselves, she says they're dependent on membership. So they're going to say and campaign on things that they think will drive up members. But she thinks that makes it so maybe they go farther in one political direction than maybe they should. She said the truth of everything is typically in the middle. So for an example, she talked about book bans, and she said she didn't think we should be banning as many books as we are. She said, are there some books in libraries that are not appropriate and that should be removed? Yes. But did she think that it was that many books, or that we needed to be banning as many books as we are, or that there's a conspiracy by schools to expose children to these books? She said she did not believe that that was true. She also talked about maybe, other issues that people have tried to talk about, vouchers being an example. She thinks that parents in general like being able to choose a school for their child. So she did not think that, talking about vouchers or other school choice type issues were really important to talk about either. So she really kind of took a more centrist stance, and she really has not tried to talk about those things in her tenure very much. If there is a bill or something along those lines, she might be seen out, supporting it. But in general, that's just not a priority for her.
Now, Truitt has been helping Green in the transition. Did she give you any sense of what she'd do next?
So we asked. She didn't give any specifics, but she said she plans to stay in education. She wants to stay here her youngest child, she has 3, I believe, but her youngest child is still a high school student in Wake County schools. And she loves the school, and she wants her child to complete that education. So, we didn't get a sense of a specific job lined up. She just said staying in education, staying in Wake County.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where she ends up. Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
That's WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst for her reporting, along with Laura Leslie, on outgoing schools chief Catherine Truitt. Go to the education section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.